You really thought you could show up at my wedding in that cheap suit? The groom sneered, summoning security to throw me out of my daughter's wedding. But the guards hesitated, whispering, "We can't. He's a VIP." A hush swept over the hall. Before we go on, make sure you subscribe to the channel and comment what time it is where you're watching. Honestly, Eldon, where did you even dig up that suit? Some clearance rack at a thrift store. Martin's words struck me mid-sip, the crystal glass of water freezing halfway to my lips. 10 minutes earlier, I had walked into Christine's dining room expecting polite introductions and pleasant conversation. Instead, I sat across from a man whose second glass of wine had apparently loosened more than his tongue. Martin. Kristen's voice carried a sharp edge as she appeared from the kitchen, her arms loaded with serving dishes. But Martin brushed off her concern with a careless flick of his hand, wine sloshing dangerously near the rim of his glass. No, sweetheart. I'm just being honest. Your father seems like a decent enough fellow, but presentation matters. His gaze swept over me like an appraiser evaluating damaged goods, especially for the wedding photos. People will be looking at those for years. The dining room's warm glow suddenly felt harsh against my skin. Beyond the wide windows, Beverly Hills sprawled in manicured perfection, every lawn a monument to wealth I had never aspired to flaunt. My modest suit, bought for $100 at a department store and worn to countless formal judicial events, suddenly felt like a costume. This suit is perfectly appropriate for formal occasions, I said evenly, though heat rose in my chest. Martin laughed, a sound like cracking ice. Appropriate. Maybe for, well, I don't know what sort of events you attend. He leaned back, gesturing with his glass. But in our circle, venture capitalists, tech executives, old money families' appearances matter. First impressions, you understand? Kristen set the dishes down harder than necessary, porcelain clinking against the mahogany table. Dad's suit looks fine, Martin. Can we please just, I'm not trying to be cruel, Martin cut in, his voice taking on a patronizing tone that made my jaw tighten. I understand not everyone can afford quality tailoring, but surely you could have borrowed something. Asked Kristen for help choosing appropriate attire. The word borrowed hung in the air like smoke. In my 30 years on the bench, I had sentenced men whose arrogance paled beside what sat across this table. Martin's assumptions about my finances might have been amusing if they weren't delivered with such sharp precision. Perhaps, I said carefully, you should focus on getting to know me instead of evaluating my wardrobe. Martin's eyes glittered with something like amusement. Oh, but the two are connected, aren't they? A man's clothes tell you everything about his station, his priorities, his circumstances. He took another long sip, emboldened by alcohol and his imagined superiority. Kristen mentioned you work in government, some sort of clerk position. The question hit like a blow. Kristen had kept my profession private at my request. Too many years of people treating judges differently had taught me the value of anonymity in personal life. But Martin's casual dismissal of my career, his assumption that, I was some lowly bureaucrat, revealed the depth of his prejudice. Something like that, I replied. Well, at least it's steady work, Martin said magnanimously, as though offering charity. Though I imagine the pay isn't much. Government salaries, you know? He gestured at the expensive art and crystal stemware surrounding us. This is what real success looks like. Eldon, maybe I can give you some investment advice, help you build something for retirement. Kristen's face had gone pale. Her hands twisted in her lap. She opened her mouth, but Martin barreled on with the momentum of a man drunk on his own superiority. Actually, you know what? I'll handle the wedding expenses. All of them. He reached across the table and patted my hand with condescending familiarity. No need for you to strain your budget trying to match our standards. Think of it as my gift to Kristen, ensuring her special day isn't compromised by financial limitations. Silence filled the room, except for the soft tick of an antique clock. Kristen's eyes welled with tears, her carefully planned evening collapsing. While Martin sat, wine-flushed, and satisfied, waiting for my grateful response. Instead, something cold and sharp crystallized in my chest, not anger, just too hot and immediate, but something else. Recognition, perhaps. The same feeling I get when evidence reveals the true nature of a defendant standing before my bench. That's very thoughtful, I said quietly. Kristen suddenly shoved back her chair, the scrape loud on hardwood. Martin, I think you should go home now. Her voice sliced through the tension with surgical precision. Martin blinked, wind-addled brain, struggling to process. What? But we haven't even now. It's a single word cut through his haze. You've had too much to drink, and you're being incredibly rude to my father. I watched Martin's face cycle through confusion, indignation, and finally a petulant acceptance I'd seen in defendants who never quite understood why their actions had consequences. He pushed back from the table with exaggerated care, trying to prove sobriety through deliberate movements. Fine, if that's how you want it. He stood, swaying slightly, and reached for his jacket draped over a nearby chair. But honestly, Kristen, someone needed to address the elephant in the room. We can't pretend these differences don't matter. Kristen followed him to the door, their voices carrying back in sharp whispers. I caught fragments: his defensive justifications, her embarrassed apologies. The door closed with a definitive click, leaving the house in sudden quiet. When she returned, her shoulders sagged with exhaustion. The confident marketing director who commanded boardrooms had been replaced by a daughter caught between two worlds, neither fully hers to control. Dad, I'm so sorry. She sank into her chair, unable to meet my eyes. Martin isn't usually like this. The wine, the stress from work hit, brings out his worst side sometimes. I watched her fidget with her engagement ring, the diamond catching the chandelier's light. How many times had I seen that same unconscious gesture in my courtroom? Spouses defending the indefensible. Love warring with dawning recognition. Kristen. I waited until she looked up. Did you ever tell him anything about my work? Her brow furrowed. Your work? No, of course not. You asked me years ago not to tell anyone, remember? After that incident with Mom's sister trying to get you to fix her parking tickets. A memory surfaced, my late wife's sister cornering me at a family barbecue, whispering conspiratorially as she slid a folder of citations across the patio table. The assumption that my position existed to benefit family had soured many relationships over the years. So he doesn't know what I do. I told him you work for the state, some kind of administrative position. She looked down at her hands. He didn't seem interested in the details. Of course he hadn't. Martin's world ran on simple hierarchies: wealth at the top, everything else relegated to irrelevance. A government clerk rated barely above invisible. Good, I said quietly. Please keep it that way. Something in my tone made her look up sharply. Dad, you're not angry with me for not defending you more, are you? Because I wanted to. But sometimes it's easier to just let him. I'm not angry with you. The words came softer than I intended. How could I explain my concern? Wasn't wounded pride, but something more troubling. That in 30 years of evaluating character from the bench, I'd learned to recognize dangerous narcissism, and Martin's casual cruelty tonight revealed patterns that worried me more than any insult. She reached across the table, taking my hand. He's really not a bad person, Dad. He comes from this incredibly competitive world where everything is about status and positioning. Sometimes he forgets not everyone operates that way. I squeezed her fingers gently. You don't need to explain him to me, but I feel like I do, because I love him and I love you, and tonight was supposed to bring everyone together. Her voice cracked slightly. Instead, it's just this mess. Looking at her face, so much like her mother's when Margaret was troubled, I felt the familiar weight of parental protection. Not hot anger, but something deeper and more patient. Judge's instinct to gather evidence before rendering judgment. These things take time, I said. Getting to know someone, understanding who they really are. It's a process. You'll give him another chance, though when he's sober and apologetic. I nodded, though something in my chest had already shifted into a different mode, entirely professional, watchful. Of course. She smiled for the first time since Martin's departure, relief softening her features. Thank you. I know once you really get to know each other. I squeezed her hand once more, then let go. I should head home. Early day tomorrow. As I gathered my jacket and keys, I noticed her watching me the same way she had as a child, trying to read my mood from my face and body language. Some instincts never fade, even in adulthood. Drive carefully, Kristen said, walking me to the door. Always do. I kissed her forehead and stepped into the Beverly Hills evening, where flawless lawns stretched under flawless streetlights, everything manicured and controlled. My car waited at the curb, reliable but unremarkable, much like its owner. By Martin Hargrove's measure, the drive from Beverly Hills to Pasadena cut through the heart of Los Angeles, past Century City's gleaming towers and into sprawling neighborhoods where real people lived real lives. Traffic moved steadily along the 110 headlights and taillights, weaving rivers of light in my mirrors. 45 minutes alone with my thoughts. 45 minutes to process what had just happened. In 3 decades on the bench, I had seen every variation of human character, the desperate, the calculating, the genuinely remorseful, the pathologically entitled. I'd learned to read the signs, the jaw that tightened when confronted with evidence, the pause before a carefully built lie, the indignation that flared when privilege was questioned. Martin Hargrove embodied classic narcissistic entitlement, the cruelty dressed up as candor, the blindness to the impact of his words, the certainty that wealth granted moral authority to judge those beneath him. I had seen men like him before. They walked into my courtroom in tailored suits with confident smiles, convinced their money and connections shielded them from consequence. They spoke to victims with the same patronizing tone Martin had used with me, as though modest means were moral failings. And the worst part wasn't the insults, it was what they revealed about how he viewed Kristen. To Martin, she wasn't a partner. She was an acquisition from a lesser social tier, someone whose family needed managing and upgrading. His offer to pay for the wedding wasn't generosity. It was a power move, control wrapped in the guise of charity. My exit approached. I took the familiar curves leading into Pasadena, street-lined streets, a sanctuary from Beverly Hills' pristine intimidation. Here, modest homes sat comfortably beside larger ones. Here, worth wasn't measured in thread count. I pulled into my driveway and lingered a moment before cutting the engine. The house looked just as I had left it. Small, well-kept, unpretentious. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a study lined with law books and family photos. Roses still bloomed by the porch, planted years ago by Margaret H. Flower, carrying memories of Saturday mornings spent in quiet companionship. Both of us lost in our sections of the newspaper. Inside, my routines unfolded automatically. Jacket in the closet, keys on the counter, a glass of water from the tap, no crystal stemware required. In my study, surrounded by shelves of precedents and opinions, I let myself weigh the evening. Kristen loved Martin. She had chosen him, planned a future with him. That was fact, immutable. But facts could evolve. People revealed themselves gradually, and sometimes those revelations changed everything. I had no intention of interfering after one ugly dinner. That would be premature, destructive even. But I wouldn't ignore what I'd seen. Tonight, Martin's mask had slipped, offering a glimpse of something darker beneath the polish. The judicial approach was clear. Observed, document, wait. Let time supply evidence. Let patterns emerge. In 30 years, I learned patience cases unfolding piece by piece until the truth became undeniable. This would be no different. I sank into my worn leather chair, the same one where I had studied case law, read Kristen bedtime stories, grieved Margaret, and rebuilt a life from solitude and duty. Tomorrow might bring an apology from Martin, a call from Kristen, or nothing at all. Whatever came, I would be ready. The house sighed into silence, a modest sanctuary of books and memories, a quiet reward for a life built on purpose. Outside, Los Angeles pulsed with restless ambition. Judges across the city weighed cases, evidence, precedent, pursuing justice. And sometimes, rarely but surely, justice revealed itself outside the courtroom too. In the patient spaces where truth crawled out of shadow. I closed my eyes, tension draining, already planning tomorrow with a precision that had carried me through decades. Time would tell what kind of man Martin Hargrove truly was. The phone's shrill ring cut through Saturday morning stillness like a blade. Coffee halfway to my lips, I glanced at the clock. 10:30 a.m., unusual hour for a social call. "Hello, Eldon. It's Martin." His voice carried hangover edges, stripped of the smoothness wine had lent it. "Listen, I need to apologize for last night. I had too much to drink, said some inappropriate things." I set down my coffee, leaning back in the chair that had borne witness to 3 decades of careful deliberation. "It's all right, Martin. These things happen." Relief poured through his voice, the sound of a man fearing consequences overnight. "Kristen was very upset after you left. She made it clear I crossed some lines." Through my study window, Saturday morning unfolded in Pasadena's comfortable ordinariness. Neighbors walking dogs, children chasing balls, ordinary lives untouched by wedding politics. "She's protective," I said. "Always has been." "Yes, well, that's actually why I'm calling." His tone shifted, confidence returning now that the apology had cleared his conscience. "I've been thinking about the situation. While I regret my delivery, the underlying concern remains valid." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "Which concern is that?" "The suit, Eldon. Look, I know I was harsh, but this wedding will host some very elite guests, tech executives, venture capitalists, old California families. First impressions matter enormously." In the yard, a neighbor's cat stalked through Margaret's roses, patient and intent on prey I couldn't see. Predator logic. Steady, inevitable. "It's a perfectly respectable suit, Martin. But respectable isn't the standard." His voice carried the tone of a teacher explaining basic facts to a slow pupil. "This is a $200,000 wedding. The photography alone costs more than most people earn in months. Every detail must be perfect." 200,000. The number lingered in the air, a window into his values. His priorities a gulf, separating my modest home from his world entirely. "I appreciate your concern. Here's what I'm thinking," Martin interrupted, voice warming with the satisfaction of a man solving problems for his inferiors. "There's a men's warehouse downtown. Nothing outrageous, but they carry suits appropriate for the occasion. I could even go with you, help you pick something. Make sure the fit and color align with the wedding palette." In the garden, the cat froze, every muscle taut, waiting for the inevitable strike. "That's thoughtful," I said, "but I'll be wearing the suit I own." Silence stretched. When Martin spoke again, his voice was edged with frustration, the kind reserved for those who dared to defy him. "Eldon, I'm trying to be diplomatic, but let me be perfectly clear. This wedding is important to me, to my career, to my reputation, to my future in-laws flying in from Connecticut. I cannot have Christine's father looking like he shops at discount stores. It's a $100 department store suit." I said evenly, "but it's quality." $100. Martin's laugh carried no humor. "My cufflinks cost more than that. Look, I'm trying to help you here, but there are limits to how much I can bend. If you walk into that wedding wearing that suit, you won't make it through the doors. Entry will be forbidden." The words landed with the weight of a gavel strike and ultimatum, not a suggestion, not even a demand, a command spoken with the unshakable certainty of a man who had never once been denied by anyone he considered beneath him. In 3 decades on the bench, I had heard threats from every corner of society: gang members, COR, POR, ATE manipulators, politicians caught in scandal. Most carried more finesse and certainly less venom than what Martin Hargrove had just laid across my kitchen table on a Saturday morning. The mask hadn't slipped, had shattered, and what it revealed was uglier than I had imagined. I see. My voice stayed even, though rage pressed hard against my ribs. Thank you for clarifying your position. Good. I'm glad we understand each other. The Men's Warehouse on Wilshire opens at 10. We could meet there this afternoon. I hung up. The receiver clicked softly into place, leaving my study wrapped in profound silence. Law books stared down from the shelves like witnesses who had heard every kind of human cruelty. Outside, the neighbor's cat had finished its hunt and disappeared into shadow, leaving only Margaret's roses swaying gently in the morning breeze. I kept my hand on the phone, the cool plastic steady in my palm, Martin's words echoing with crystalline sharpness. Entry will be forbidden. The dial tone buzzed against my ear for several long seconds before I set the receiver down completely. The silence that followed felt thick, heavy with implications that would have seemed unimaginable just a day earlier. I stood slowly, my joints stiffed from the sudden rise, and crossed to the study window. The cat was gone, but its work remained scattered feathers beneath the rose bushes. Nature's casual brutality displayed against the backdrop of Margaret's careful garden. Entry will be forbidden. 30 years of judicial service had taught me to recognize threats in all their forms. The blunt intimidation of street criminals, the polished manipulation of white-collar defendants, the cold calculation of the powerful who believed themselves untouchable. Martin's ultimatum held all three, neatly wrapped in the veneer of civility. Yet what chilled me most wasn't the words themselves. It was the certainty behind them. He believed he truly held that authority to dictate my place, to decide whether I could stand at my daughter's side, based not on love or respect, but on the thread count of my clothing. And worse, he believed I would yield, that I would either comply or slink away in shame, too cowed by his wealth to resist. I moved through my house slowly, noticing it as if for the first time. The modest furniture Margaret and I had chosen together. Family photos clustered on end tables. The kitchen where we had shared 30 years of coffee and conversation. Suddenly, it all felt fragile, as though Martin's poisonous worldview might seep into the walls themselves. In the hallway, I stopped before a photograph of Marguerite, taken 2 years before her passing. She wore the expression I remembered best, patient amusement at human folly. A woman who had lived long enough to recognize how much of life's drama was just noise. What would you make of all this? I asked softly, but I already knew. Margaret had always possessed a surgeon's instinct for character, able to spot cruelty hidden behind polished smiles. She would have seen through Martin within minutes. More importantly, she would have expected me not to bow. I went to my bedroom and opened the closet. There, between casual shirts and judicial robes, hung the contested suit. Navy wool, classic cut, bought at Nordstrom 2 years earlier during one of my rare shopping excursions. It had served me at formal events, earned compliments from colleagues, even photographed well at ceremonies. $100. Martin's cufflinks cost more. I lifted the suit into the window's light. The fabric was still strong, the tailoring still sharp, the color as rich as the day I bought it. By any reasonable measure, it was more than adequate, perfectly suitable for the occasion. But Martin didn't live by reasonable standards. His world ran on hierarchies of money and status, where price tags determined worth. In his eyes, I wasn't Kristen's father. I was a liability, a problem to be managed, a source of embarrassment to be silenced. I hung the suit back carefully and closed the door. The decision forming in my mind was as inevitable as the neighbor's cat completing its hunt. It wasn't born of anger, though anger burned in me, nor pride, though my pride had been struck. No, this came from something deeper, the recognition that some behaviors require consequences. Some men must be shown they are not untouchable. For 3 decades, I had watched human nature unfold before me like a case file. I had learned to separate fury from judgment, emotion from outcome. That skill would serve me again this time outside the courtroom. Martin had miscalculated. He assumed his wealth made him immune, that his circle of influence insulated him from repercussion. He was about to learn otherwise. I returned to my study and sank into the chair where I had prepared countless cases, written opinions that shaped precedent, weighed questions of justice and punishment. The wedding was 1 month away. 30 days for Martin's arrogance to ferment into overconfidence. 30 days for him to spread his ultimatum to the very guests he longed to impress. 30 days to forget that consequences can arrive in unexpected forms. I picked up my newspaper and resumed the motions of Saturday morning. But everything had changed. I was no longer just Kristen's father, hoping for the best. I was a judge preparing to render a verdict. The weeks that followed wore the mask of normalcy. April slipped into May, Los Angeles humming its endless background tune of sun and traffic. At court, I kept my schedule precise. Coffee at 6, courthouse by 7:30, afternoon sessions until 5. Colleagues saw nothing unusual, my calm, deliberate demeanor unchanged. At home, preparations for the wedding unfolded with equal precision. RSVPs managed, gifts selected, travel arranged. Each detail handled like a case, filed meticulously, methodically. But beneath that surface, different preparations took shape. Kristen called twice, her voice bright with bridal excitement. She talked of final dress fittings, floral arrangements, her tone wrapped in joy. Not once did she mention Martin's threat. Either he had concealed it from her, or she had chosen silence. Knowing his need for image control, I suspected the former. The invitation arrived in late April heavy. Cardstock embossed in gold. Mr. and Mrs. James Hargrove request the pleasure of your company. The Beverly Wilshire Hotel Ballroom. Cocktails at 6. Dinner at 7. Dancing until midnight. $200,000 condensed into elegant script. I pinned it to my refrigerator beside grocery lists and court schedules, a daily reminder of what loomed ahead. Each morning, I studied it with my coffee. The timeline, the location, the dress code formal, but no mention of price tags or thread counts. My own preparations deepened. I researched the Beverly Wilshire's layout, studied photographs of the ballroom, noted its exits and adjoining spaces. I read about its operations the way I once studied case law. Piece by piece, the picture formed. The suit hung in my closet, like exhibit evidence in a case awaiting trial. I examined it regularly, ensuring it remained immaculate. No wrinkle, no stain, no flaw that could hand Martin fresh ammunition. $100, a number etched into my mind, a symbol of everything Martin despised about me. 3 nights before the wedding, I sat in my study, reviewing the guest list Kristen had shared. Tech entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, old money families from both coasts. The exact audience Martin lived to impress the very people he feared might see a crack in his carefully constructed facade. I wondered how many of Martin's elite guests knew about his ultimatum. Had he boasted about it as an amusing anecdote, the story of putting his future father-in-law in his place? Did they applaud his methods, or would they recoil if they knew the truth? Soon enough, those questions would be answered. The night before the wedding, I moved through my routine with deliberate precision. Dinner at 6, grilled salmon and vegetables, chosen carefully to avoid any chance of discomfort the following day. At 7, the news anchors delivering politics and weather with the same grave tone, as though traffic patterns carried the weight of national crisis. At 9, I climbed the stairs to my bedroom. The navy suit waited in its place, pressed and ready. $100 of department store craftsmanship that had somehow become the centerpiece of a battle I had never chosen but fully intended to win. I laid out the pieces: shirt, tie, shoes, jacket, trousers, arranged like evidence before trial. At 10, I slipped into bed. My alarm set, though unnecessary. Los Angeles thrummed outside. millions seeking Saturday night distraction in neon bars or polished restaurants. Tomorrow, another wedding at the Beverly Wilshire Inn, another performance of vows and luxury. But for Martin Hargrove, it would also be Judgment Day. Some challenges arrive dressed in $100 suits, carrying 30 years of judicial understanding about the relationship between arrogance and consequence. 6:45. The alarm never stirred me. I had been awake since 5:30, watching daylight creep across the ceiling like a patient witness. Wedding day. I rose without ceremony and faced the mirror. A 65-year-old man looked back, lines etched by decades of testimony, by long hours balancing evidence and justice. A face that knew one truth well: consequences delayed are not consequences denied. I showered and shaved with courtroom precision. Each stroke of the razor stripped away hesitation, leaving only clarity. My hands betrayed no nerves. This was not a nervous father preparing for his daughter's wedding. This was a professional readying himself for another consequential proceeding. Toast and coffee at the kitchen counter, simple fuel before a day of significance. Outside, suburbia unfolded in ordinary calm. Dogs walked, sprinklers spun, neighbors eased into weekend rhythms. All so normal. And yet, in Beverly Hills, Martin's stage was being set. His ultimatum had been clear: comply or stay home. He had believed in my silence, believed in my surrender, believed wrong. Upstairs, I opened the closet. The suit hung as it had for 30 days. Navy wool, classic cut, the very garment over which Martin had tried to claim dominion. I lifted the jacket to the light. Still sharp, still flawless, still perfectly dignified. By any sane measure, it was ideal. But Martin Hargrove's world didn't run on sanity. His world belonged to wealth, control, and exclusion. Shirt, pressed white cotton. Trousers, draping easily into place. Tie, knotted with practiced precision. Piece by piece, the attire became armor. When the jacket slid over my shoulders, I felt the shift no longer a wounded father, but a judge prepared to render verdict. In the mirror, the reflection was impeccable. Suit crisp, colors harmonious, the quiet dignity of a man ready for ceremony. To any observer, I was simply a well-dressed guest. To Martin, I was defiance wrapped in wool. I checked my wallet, my keys. Kristen's invitation rested securely in my pocket, my official admission into the theater of Martin's making. My car started as faithfully as it had every morning for years. As I drove toward the freeway, I carried the same calm focus I had brought to trials of consequence. Justice wasn't denied, was merely refined, sharpened by patience. Traffic flowed as though Los Angeles itself had cleared the path. 45 minutes later, the Beverly Wilshire rose like a temple to opulence, cream-colored stone gleaming in the afternoon sun. Valets in spotless uniforms conducted Bentleys, Teslas, and Jaguars with a choreography practiced to perfection. My modest sedan received the same courtesy, the young attendant greeting me with respect. Money shouted, but professionalism spoke universally. Inside, marble floors and crystal chandeliers announced 2 centuries of wealth. Guests in tailored elegance moved in clusters, their voices carrying the weight of people accustomed to being heard. The ballroom doors stood open, revealing an interior bathed in golden light, with white flowers spilling in cascades around the altar. The air carried the strains of a string quartet, fine, unobtrusive, the very soundtrack of wealth congratulating itself. Every detail Martin had promised was there: exclusivity, theater, spectacle. And there, among orchids and ivory silk, stood Kristen. Her dress caught the light, flowing like moonlit water. For a moment, my practiced composure nearly broke. She was radiant Margaret's daughter, Margaret's smile alive on her face, the kind of beauty that undoes fathers. When her eyes found me, her entire face brightened. "Dad," she moved carefully, managing her train with grace. "You look wonderful. That suit is perfect." perfect. A word with layers of meaning she couldn't possibly know. You're breathtaking, I said softly. Absolutely gorgeous. Her eyes shone. Thank you for being here. I know this isn't your kind of thing, all these people, all this formality, but it means everything to me. Sweetheart, Martin's voice cut through our moment like a knife through silk. He approached with a stride sharpened by certainty, surrounded by his hand-picked guests, radiating authority like it was another bespoke accessory. A month had done nothing to blunt him. If anything, the time had burnished his polish, made him more convinced of his control, and his eyes went straight to my suit. The same navy wool that had sparked his objection. Okay? The same $100 department store suit that had unsettled his expectations so much. I watched realization form on his face, followed quickly by a flash of disbelief. I spoke to you about that suit, he said quietly, his voice lowered so Kristen wouldn't hear. Martin, this isn't the moment to create conflict. Let's not take away from Kristen's happiness. Conflict. His expression tightened, carrying the frustration of someone who felt challenged. I explained my position very clearly. We discussed it. You said you understood. Kristen looked between us, concern showing in her eyes. What's going on, Martin? What do you mean? But he pressed on, his voice lifting slightly, catching the attention of nearby guests who turned toward the commotion. You chose not to listen, Eldon. You ignored my request about what was suitable for this day. And now his glance swept over me with disapproval. There are consequences. The words hung in the air, drawing the room's focus. Conversation softened, guests sensing a disruption. Kristen moved forward, her voice edged with worry. Martin, stop this, please. Stay out of this for now, sweetheart. His tone was firm, as if trying to manage the situation. Your father and I need to settle something. His eyes scanned the room, searching for support until they found the security staff near the doors. A hint of satisfaction appeared on his face. Martin raised his hand in a clear signal. Across the ballroom, a tall man in a dark suit noticed and walked toward us with calm, measured steps. Security, Martin announced with authority. Please escort this man out. The man's appearance carried quiet professionalism, tailored suit, subtle earpiece, steady posture. His badge identified him as Victor Reyes, head of security. By the time he arrived, all conversation had stopped. What seems to be the issue, sir? Victor asked, his voice calm, his eyes observant. This gentleman, Martin motioned toward me with impatience, was told not to attend dressed this way. He ignored that instruction. I want him removed. Kristen's face went pale, her hands trembling. Martin, no. This is my father. Your father should have followed the requirements, Martin replied, his voice cool and certain. I've invested over $200,000 into this wedding. I will not have it disrupted by a choice like this. Victor studied me for a moment, the navy suit, my composed manner, my quiet patience. His expression changed slightly. I'm sorry, sir, he said to Martin, respectful but firm. I cannot ask this gentleman to leave. Martin blinked in disbelief. What do you mean, you can't? I'm the host here. It's my wedding. I understand, sir, Victor answered steadily. But this gentleman is a VIP guest. Our hotel's policy does not allow actions that would inconvenience someone of his standing. The word standing caught Martin off guard. He frowned, looking from Victor to me, as though the explanation didn't make sense. VIP, him? He asked sharply. He's in a $100 suit. He works an ordinary job. What standing could he possibly have? Victor's tone carried a trace of quiet emphasis. Sir, I can't share details about our VIP arrangements, but I can assure you. He glanced toward me. Mills, I said softly. Mr. Mills is always welcome here, and I would strongly recommend not creating further complications around his attendance. Martin's face flushed as his confidence faltered. This doesn't make sense. I'm the one paying for this. And we appreciate your business, Victor replied, his voice calm but firm. But some guests have accommodations that go beyond specific event arrangements. His tone held a clear warning. Let's allow the ceremony to continue. Around us, the audience watched closely, captivated by the unexpected turn. Who is he? Martin demanded, confusion and unease growing. His hand shook as he pointed toward Victor. This isn't right. I need answers. Victor's posture shifted slightly, showing readiness. Sir, I need you to take a moment outside to calm down. Outside. Martin's voice cracked. This is my wedding. I spent $200,000 here. You work for me today. Victor's voice grew firm. Actually, sir, I work for the hotel, and our policy is clear about any situation that disrupts other guests. The crowd had gathered into a circle now, their attention fixed on the unfolding scene. What had begun as a wedding was turning into something entirely different. You can't remove me from my own wedding. Martin stepped forward in anger. This is outrageous. Victor reacted swiftly, taking hold of his arm, guiding it firmly but carefully behind him, and steering him toward the exit. Let go of me. This is unacceptable. Do you know who I am? Victor's voice stayed calm. Yes, sir. And right now, you need to step outside immediately. The crowd parted as Victor led Martin toward the doors. His tuxedo had lost its polish, his hair out of place, his frustration plain for all to see. In minutes, his confident image had shifted to one of disorder. This isn't finished, Martin shouted as he was taken out into the courtyard. You'll hear from me again, every one of you. Kristen followed, her gown trailing across the floor, her face torn between shock and sadness. Guests moved after them, compelled by the drama. Out in the courtyard, surrounded by trimmed gardens and fountains, Martin's voice carried. You don't realize what you've done. I'll take this further. Victor stayed composed, keeping his hold steady. Sir, if you continue, I'll be forced to call the authorities. Do it. Call whoever you like. You'll regret this when the truth comes out. The crowd formed a semicircle, their expressions a mix of disbelief, discomfort, and curiosity. What had started as a wedding had now become a very public unraveling. But Martin wasn't finished. Standing there in his rumpled tuxedo, held firmly by hotel security, carried on with the frantic energy of someone whose certainty was slipping away. I'll take action against all of you, he shouted, his voice sharp. Every single person who thinks they can treat me this way, starting with that man. Hey, gestured wildly toward where I stood, calmly watching, and his so-called $100 suit. Let's see you try challenging the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. The voice cut through Martin's rant with perfect timing. Elena Vasquez stepped forward from the crowd, her elegant silver hair shining in the light. She walked with the ease of someone used to commanding attention. Martin's mouth opened and closed without sound, his tirade stopping instantly as if someone had cut his power. Around us, the wedding guests fell into silence, processing what they had just heard. Chief Justice, Martin repeated, his voice dropping to almost nothing. Elena smiled, the satisfaction of a well-placed revelation clear on her face. Judge Eldon Mills, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the highest judicial officer in the state. She gestured toward me with unmistakable respect. I've had the honor of arguing cases before his court for 15 years. The color drained from Martin's face as the truth sank in. His eyes darted between Elena and me, his mind clearly struggling to connect the simple man in the $100 suit with the title he had just learned. Chief Justice, he stammered, his voice cracking. But he's the most respected judge in the state, Elena finished smoothly. Known for his wisdom, his fairness, and his steady integrity, someone whose reputation is beyond reproach. Victor released Martin's arm, stepping back as the fight left him completely. Martin stood, swaying slightly, his expensive tuxedo wrinkled, his carefully built image falling apart around him. Eldon. Martin turned toward me with pleading eyes. Your Honor, Forgive me. I didn't know. I never wouldn't have what? I asked quietly, insulted my appearance, tried to exclude me from my daughter's wedding, demanded I prove my worth with expensive clothing. Each question landed with weight. Martin flinched, his mouth working as he searched for words to undo a month's worth of arrogance. I was wrong, he whispered. Completely wrong. Please, Your Honor, I'll do anything to fix this. The suit looks fine. Perfect, even. I don't know what I was thinking. The guest watched intently, the pieces of the story falling into place before their eyes. Some had come hoping to network, but now found themselves witnessing a lesson in humility. The suit was never the issue, I said, my voice carrying the steady tone I used in court. Character matters more than clothing, Martin. Respect matters more than wealth. Yes, absolutely. You're right. Martin nodded frantically, desperation making him agree with every word. I understand that now. Please, how can I make this right? I glanced at the gathered crowd, then back at the man whose choices had caused this moment. The setting felt familiar, delivering judgment after careful thought, ensuring the lesson would remain. You can start by apologizing to Kristen, I said quietly. She's the one whose wedding day you disrupted. She's the one who deserves your sincerity. Martin turned toward his bride, who stood frozen in her ivory dress, tears sliding down her face as she absorbed it all. The day she had dreamed of since childhood had become a very public test of her fiancé's character. Kristen, I'm so sorry, Martin began, his voice breaking. I never meant, but in Kristen's eyes, I could see that simple words would not be enough. The damage went deeper than one disrupted event. She had seen something lasting about the man she promised to marry, his worst side, felt under pressure. The crowd stayed silent, waiting for resolution. Before Martin could continue, I stepped forward and gently took the microphone from the quartet stand. The courtyard fell completely silent as every eye turned toward me. Friends, I began, my voice calm but carrying. Today, we've all witnessed something important, a lesson I hope will stay with each of us. The crowd leaned closer, sensing significance. Even Martin stopped speaking to listen. For 30 years, I've observed human behavior. I've seen how people reveal themselves under pressure, how they treat those they believe are beneath them, how they act when they think no one important is watching. I paused, scanning the faces. Business leaders, investors, and longtime families all focused on my words. Today, my future son-in-law judged me by the price of my clothing instead of the strength of my character. He assumed that because I didn't show wealth, I was less worthy of respect. That assumption is not only wrong, it's dangerous. Kristen stepped closer, still crying, but her face showing pride beneath the pain. The true measure of a person isn't found in their bank account or their wardrobe, I continued. It's found in how they treat workers, how they speak to family, how they behave when they think there are no consequences. Martin stood, frozen, pale, as my words uncovered his failings before everyone who mattered to him. Character is revealed not in moments of triumph, but in moments of pressure, not when surrounded by equals, but when meeting those they mistakenly believe are beneath them. Applause began slowly, Alina, and a few other professionals leading. It built quickly as more joined, recognizing truth when they heard it. So let this be a lesson for us all, I concluded. Judge others not by possessions, but by their actions. Respect is earned through character, not bought through wealth. The applause swelled. Guests who had come for a wedding, realizing they had seen something far more meaningful, a reminder of values that outlast money. When the clapping faded, I handed the microphone back and walked to Kristen. She fell into my arms, her dress rustling as she held me tight. I'm so proud of you, Dad, she whispered. You handled this perfectly. Around us, guests began to disperse, their conversations alive with what they had just seen. Some approached me, expressing gratitude for the lesson, Martin stood alone by the fountain, his earlier pride gone, isolated at his own celebration, his true self now visible to all who mattered to him. Justice, I reflected, sometimes arrives in ways no one expects. The $100 suit had proven its worth not through price, but through the principles it helped defend. The wedding could continue now, but with a much deeper understanding of who truly deserved respect in that courtyard. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching.